Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Latter-day Lives podcast. My name is Shawn Rapier. I am your host. And boy, are we doing something different this week, and actually a little bit uncomfortable for me. I'm outside my comfort zone because not only are we recording the audio this week for the podcast, and it's available everywhere you normally get the show, but we're also doing video. You can go to our YouTube channel, just search for Latter-day Lives, and we've recorded the conversation with our guest this week. And I'm recording this on video now, and again, a little bit outside my comfort zone. But we've had requests to put this on YouTube. I don't know that we'll do it every week, but we're going to try it this week at least. So, and what a great show to try it for. My guest this week, Shawn Stevens, is such an amazing actor. And in fact, when he left, my wife was like, wow, I've never seen you so starstruck. And there's a reason. Shawn, in the late 70s, early 80s, was on every show that I absolutely loved. I mean, it was just, he just named show after show that he was on, and he's incredible. And we've actually got some exciting news to announce about Shawn Stevens. Shawn was actually just cast as Scrooge in the Hale Center Theater production of A Christmas Carol. And that's going to be here in Utah. It's up in South Salt Lake County at the beautiful Hale Center Theater. We actually talk about that theater during the interview. And for Shawn, I mean, he's going to be amazing. Our family will for sure go see it. You should check it out. If you want to see Shawn in A Christmas Carol at the Hale Center Theater, be sure to call them because there are two actors playing Scrooge. They do like 20 shows a week, something like that. So they got two actors. Make sure you see it on the night that Shawn is there. You are going to love this conversation. Shawn's story is amazing. And later on in the episode, in my latter-day life, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why you can and should go home again. It's all coming up. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's conversation. And what an honor it is today in the Latter-day Lives studio to have as my guest a bona fide star. And I mean a star. Shawn, you cannot deny your stardom because I have the proof. My guest is actor Shawn Stevens. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm starstruck that you're here, man. It's so cool.
I'm starstruck to be here.
Oh, this is really exciting. So Shawn is an actor, and for people my age and a little bit older, I mean, when I say star, we're talking right alongside all the heartthrobs of this generation. So, but let's take it back before we get into all the crazy Hollywood.
I can't agree with most of what you've just said, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Before we get into Hollywood, let's talk about your younger life. You grew up in New Jersey?
Lived in New Jersey till I was 10.
Yeah.
And my parents were quite young. I was born in 58.
Yeah.
Which makes me 60. So
that's awesome. You wear it well.
Well, thank you. It's nothing that a little spit and polish won't fix up a little bit. But yeah, so I was born in New Jersey in 58 to very, very young parents, 16 and 17.
Yeah.
So they were still kids.
In fact, based on your bio, you attended something as a baby that I've never heard of. You were at your parents' prom.
I was at my parents' prom. In fact, they're going back. They're going back this year in October. Well, we're just about there for their 60th high school reunion. And I was there, so they actually invited me to tag along. But
yeah, you said I don't have to go to this one.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, I just had my 42nd.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you grew up in New Jersey. Do you consider yourself a New Jersey boy, or California boy, or a Utah boy?
Well, not Utah quite yet. I always pretty much consider myself a New Jersey kid,
yeah.
Even though my formative years were spent mostly in California. Those first 10 years of my life before we moved to California were really wonderful because my parents were so young, I got to spend a great deal of time with my grandparents.
Oh, awesome.
And they were both on both sides. I didn't know my paternal grandfather. He passed away when I was very little, but I knew my grandfather on my mother's side and my grandmother, and then my father's mother as well. And
awesome.
Even knew some great-grandparents. So those were just magical
and
years.
That's the blessing of having young parents.
Absolutely.
You know, that's great.
But it's also been a little interesting because I identified more with Elvis Presley and the Beatles, and I mean I consider that my music. Where my peers who came into families with a little bit older parents,
right?
You know, they skewed a little bit later in their musical.
A little more disco.
A little more disco, yeah.
Yeah.
I never quite identified. I was never, hard rock or anything like that. I was more the British invasion. And
that's awesome. Very cool. So, do you have siblings?
I do.
Yeah?
I'm the oldest of 3 children.
Awesome.
I have a sister who's 3 years younger than me and a brother who's 5 years younger than me. And they both still live in the Burbank, California area, which is where we moved to when I was 10 years old.
Yeah, when you're 10 years old, your family moved to Burbank, to Hollywood area.
Yeah.
And really, did you know at that time then that you wanted to pursue acting?
I didn't really know that I wanted to pursue acting per se, but I wanted to be a performer. I was always a ham. My maternal grandparents especially were very into the arts.
Yeah.
My grandmother was a pianist. My grandfather was a violinist. As a child, I would say that I probably spent more time with them than I did my own parents for the first few years of my life. And
Sure.
so there was always music around the house and culture. When I got a little older, my grandmother, I was probably 5 or 6, she and I season tickets to a local community theater to go and see their summer drama program. And the first play I ever saw was The Frog Prince.
Oh, cool.
And I remember that. And
It's a neat one for a kid.
yeah, it just somehow the spark.
But is that what took your family out to California? Was
No,
let's
not at
go
all.
pursue the arts? No,
No,
your,
no.
your father had another reason to go.
No, my parents were very working class. My father was a carpenter.
Yeah.
And he was also worked at Newark Airport. He wanted to be a pilot, actually, most of his life. And so he took a job at Newark Airport working for the now long gone TWA Airlines.
I flew them many times.
Yeah.
Many
And my mother
times.
was a waitress. So
Trans World. Yeah.
So my father had the opportunity to transfer out to Los Angeles, where he had actually grown up in Inglewood.
Oh, okay, cool.
And so when that opportunity came up, he saw more opportunity for my mom and he and my siblings in California, a little more better pay, a little more
Sure.
quality of life. So, that's what they thought.
And this was in the late 60s when you could afford to move to
Yeah.
Los Angeles still.
Yeah.
There were a lot of parts of it.
Well, we probably couldn't really afford it that much even then if it wouldn't have been for a great-grandfather rather, my father's grandfather, who still lived out here, and he owned a couple of homes, and he rented one to my parents for a very
Awesome.
nominal fee, which they ended up buying.
Good to have
So,
family.
and they're still in that house.
So how did you make that leap into performing? Was it gradual or was it all at once?
I was always drawn to the arts, as I said, and I did at one time, I think, have that idea that I wanted to maybe be on television. I didn't know what that entailed, but it looked pretty cool, and the Mickey Mouse Club was on, and in Burbank you have Disney Studios, you have Warner Brothers, you have Universal Studios, you had NBC, and it was just
Paramount, you had all of
that's
them
what
there.
everybody,
Yeah.
everybody's father or mother worked at the studios. And on the street where I lived, there was a fellow who worked at Disney Studios, whose father worked at Disney Studios. He became a friend of mine, and I wrote this letter, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Disney, I want to be in one of your shows," and he passed it on to the casting person there, and they had me in. And the casting person said, "Well, you really need to get some experience, so I suggest you go and do some community theater." So another friend of mine, his father knew of a theater in Glendale, which was called the Glendale Center Theater.
Cool.
I'll tell you about that in a minute. You may not be aware of the significance there, but he told me that they were holding an audition for the play A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And by this time I'm 12 years old. And so I talked my mom into taking me down there on a Saturday. I auditioned for the play, got cast as the role of the Spirit of Christmas Past.
Oh, fantastic.
At 12
role.
years old. So
Yeah.
I'm wearing, at 12 years old, I'm wearing a white tunic and white leotards. And I got a flower thing in my hair. It was not the most masculine.
It's a fun role,
It was a
though.
fun role, but I didn't invite many of my friends to come and see it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what started it.
And there's a Utah and LDS connection to that theater. Tell
Yes,
us who
there
ran
is.
that theater.
Now, mind you, at this time, I'm not LDS.
Right. Oh, and that's important. I don't think we
Yeah.
mentioned that at the
Yeah.
beginning. Your family is not LDS. You were not LDS.
No.
Probably didn't know what LDS stood for at that time.
Not really.
But you definitely ran into the church a lot. Because
Well, I did, and
if you
I
look
was
at this connection.
I was raised in a very strict Christian home.
Yeah.
My great grandfather on my father's side was a minister. My grandmother was very active. My great grandmother. So for generations, several generations anyway, and we'll probably get to that at some point too. But for several generations, we were members of a church called the Church of Christ.
Yeah.
No instrumental music, long dresses, you know, it was very, very strict and very, very entrenched in the Bible and only the Bible.
And so, your parents were very into this religion.
Very, as was
Yeah.
I. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was every Sunday, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And that's the way I was raised. My mother was raised Methodist, and so on my mother's side of the family, I still had some religious background, but it wasn't as dogmatic. Is that a word? I'm going to use it anyway.
Dogmastic, I think so. Oh, dogmatic.
Dogmatic, thank you.
Dogmatic, yes. Well, I was going to say what's funny, though, is actually in this age, you know, we're talking early 70s, I, too, was going to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. It was before we combined the blocks.
Right.
So even though we have that in common. So tell us who owned the theater that you were performing at.
I think you know. And
I know.
You're baiting me, so I'm going to take the hook.
I'm getting it. I want to hear this because it actually ties back to several of the guests on our podcast.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, people in Utah probably are not aware for the most part, and probably not so much in California even anymore, but the founders of the Hale Center Theaters, Ruth and Nathan Hale, and then their daughter Sandy and her husband Alan Deepening started a theater. Ruth and Nathan had actually moved from Utah to LA because they wanted to become actors on the big screen. And with a family to provide for, the jobs were few and far between. They did a lot of writing, but to make ends meet, they would put on plays in their living room and invite people. And that became a theater called the Doran Street Theater, which they outgrew that in a couple of years, and they built this wonderful facility in Glendale, which became the Glendale Center Theater. The name Hale wasn't attached to it, but it was owned by Ruth and Nathan Hale and Sandy and Alan Deepening.
Yeah.
So Ruth and Nathan, I did every play from the time I was 12 years old until the time I was 18.
It's awesome.
And any play that had the part that I was age appropriate for, I would do.
Yep.
So, and then into high school, I continued to do theater, and music was a great love as well. I love singing. And
so tying back to the Hales, I mentioned, I teased a little bit that the podcast. So the Hales have a grandson named Kurt Hale, who is a very well-known producer-director. Mm-hmm. So if you've seen Church Ball or The Singles Ward or The RM, and we've had Michael Birkeland and we've had Scott Christopher and we've had so many actors, Dave Nibley, who have been in all their movies. Kurt Hale is their grandson, and he did all those movies. And then the Hale Center Theater, 2 locations here in Utah.
Cody Hale.
The same family,
owns
exactly.
Cody Hale, son of Ruth and Nathan.
And then Quinn Deepening, who's their other grandson. It must be their grandson. He's another friend of mine. So.
Really? And then Mark and Sally owned the Hale Center Theater in West Valley. Oh, yeah. And now that's, they've outgrown that, and they've moved to the Hale Center Theater in Sandy.
The one in Sandy is massive. So that was a big part of your life growing up.
Absolutely.
Did you have any exposure to the church then? Do you remember your first exposure to the church?
Well, I knew that they were Mormons, and my parents knew that they were Mormons, so they were not actually real keen on me working at the theater.
Yeah, I was going to ask because a lot of Christian faiths don't look too favorably on Mormonism. So were your parents concerned about you hanging out with Mormons?
I don't think they were concerned so much at the time. There was obviously a great misconception and not a lot of knowledge of the Mormon faith, really. I mean, they had their ideas of what they thought the Mormon faith was about. But I think, in those years, I was very attached to the faith of my childhood, and really wasn't entertaining joining Mormons. But we did get into some gospel-type discussions, and I had my point of view, and they had their point of view.
Right.
And oddly enough, the point of views were very,
very close,
very intertwined. But of course,
it's one of my favorite things about faith. I mean, it's funny because I have long conversations when I travel with Muslims, with people of all kinds of faiths, with other Christians, with Jews. Our crossover every time is greater than our differences. And I mean, we're talking in religions that are not Christian faiths even, but among Christian faiths, we're so close. And yet sometimes, unfortunately, we focus on differences.
I actually did a play called Are the Meadowlarks Still Singing? You ever seen that?
No.
That is a play that I don't know if Ruth and Nathan wrote it or Sandy and Alan Deepening wrote it, but it was a play that I know at the West Valley Hale Theater, they did quite often as a missionary tool on Sunday nights. And it's about a I think they were Methodist or Presbyterian family where the father's a minister and the daughter brings home a Mormon.
Oh, how funny.
And, mischief.
Hilarity ensues.
Yes, ensues from that.
So at some point you make this transition to film. You had the meeting with Disney. They said, go do some plays.
Yeah.
How did you eventually get back into television and film?
Well, I continued to do high school plays, middle school plays, the plays at the Glendale Center Theater. Just out of high school, I auditioned for a group called the Young Americans, and I toured the United States with them for a year. We did Music Man in Oklahoma in 165 cities across 48 states. That was a whirlwind tour. But when I got back from that, another friend, oddly enough, the same one that introduced me to the Glendale Center Theater, said he knew of a friend who was doing a small independent film, and they were looking for a young man, my type, to play the lead. And so he introduced us. They offered me the role, and of course I accepted because I was elated.
What was that film called?
It was called No Place to Ride.
No Place to Ride.
Yeah, which nobody ever saw it. It's probably a good thing. But the thing that impacted my life most about that film was that it was shot in Kanab, Utah.
Wow.
So here's this perspiring actor who's 19 years old, who's on his own in Kanab, Utah for a few weeks shooting
of all places.
Shooting this movie.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do on a Sunday in Kanab if you're not shooting and you're stuck in the Perry Lodge?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
you're not going out.
Well, you're not going to a Church of Christ anyway.
No, for sure.
So right next door to the Perry Lodge was this Mormon church, this Mormon chapel. And I saw all these families walking there was nothing else to do. Everything else was shut down. So nobody's here to see me. Nobody knows who I am. I'm just going to walk in and sit in the back row and just see what all my friends have been doing all these years.
How funny.
And that was it.
So tell us where that took you. I mean, how did the conversion happen?
Yeah, I came back from that experience. I felt something. Wasn't sure what that something was. I'd never felt it before, so I couldn't put a label on it. But when I got back to California, some people introduced me. Some of my Mormon friends introduced me to this woman who later would become my manager. And her name was Bonnie Larson, and she was LDS. And
well, you were just surrounded by Mormons.
The plot thickens here pretty quickly. So Bonnie Larson becomes my manager. She represents several people who are LDS and are involved in these plays like Saturday's Warrior and My Turn on Earth and stuff. I had no idea what those were. But I told her, I had a really good time in Kanab. I walked into a Mormon church and I felt something. I have no idea what it was.
That's the wrong thing to say to a Mormon.
I'm curious, but I'm not interested. And she said, oh, okay, well, let me introduce you to a couple of kids that I know who happen to be involved in these plays.
Oh, I love it. I love this whole story so much.
And then they take me over one Saturday afternoon, like probably the next day, because I was pretty eager, and they were obviously very eager to have me sit down with the person who was the ward mission leader, whose name was Lyman Dayton. Lyman Dayton is an LDS director, best known for the film Where the Red Fern Grows.
Awesome. Against
a Crooked Sky, Seven Alone,
Love
Baker's
it.
Hawk, all these films. So anyway, I didn't know who he was at the time. I didn't know about his movies and his connection as being a director. But they started presenting the first discussion to me.
Awesome.
I didn't know what the first discussion was, but when they got to the end of it, they said, okay, when can we set up another appointment to come back and take the second discussion? I said, well, what's wrong with now? I ended up taking all then 6 discussions in one day.
Wow.
Committed to baptism, was baptized the next Saturday, and I moved out of my house the next day and moved in with Lyman Dayton's family.
So did you talk to your parents about joining the church?
I think everything worked out the way it was supposed to work out, and I wouldn't change. For the outcome, I wouldn't have changed anything that transpired except for one thing, and that would have been to have told my parents previous to my being baptized.
Oh, you talked to them after.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Well, I knew that if I told them before,
yeah,
that would be a scene. And,
sure,
the adage,
that's
it's
fair.
easier to ask forgiveness than permission.
Right. Yeah, that's totally fair.
So, but it was, I think it was, in hindsight, and now having my own children, how would I have reacted?
Right.
I think I would have wanted to have been given the opportunity to,
Yeah.
but I denied them that, and I just came up and.
But
So
I think that's fair.
was,
I mean, you did it out of love and concern. So
yeah, but it ended up being very painful to them, and caused a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of pain and anguish for my family.
In case I don't get back to it, how are things with your family now, with the church and everything?
Well, I'll say this very quickly, but as it turns out, my great-great-great-grandfather and great-great-great-great-grandfathers had joined the church in the 1830s in Canada.
Incredible.
Baptized by Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery or Sidney Rigdon, and emigrated to the United States. And my great-great-great-grandfather was in the Mormon Battalion, bodyguard to Joseph Smith, lived right across the street. I have the deed from Joseph Smith to my grandfather, selling him the property across the street. And,
unbelievable.
And he was the scout alongside Porter Rockwell for the 1847 company. And
awesome.
He's buried in Bluff, Utah, because he was in the.
And you didn't know all this.
I knew none of this. So
incredible.
I was able to share that with my family after I discovered it. Once I started doing my genealogy and had discovered all this, and it was never, oh man, great! That means we're all Mormons. It was more, well, so what? What does that mean? That's history. That's not now. And so. To answer your question, I have a great relationship with my parents.
Good.
We just don't discuss religion.
Sure. I think we all have family like that.
Yeah. My sister has become Catholic since. My brother doesn't follow a faith tradition per se, but he lives a good life. And so I think my parents, for their own reasons, don't attend church anymore either. So of all the kids, I think that they're proud of me. And
sure.
the way I've lived my life and raised my family, and they're proud of my children and their great-grandchildren that my kids have given them. And
so you've joined the church now. You've embarked on this acting career. Tell us about the Mackenzies of Paradise Cove.
Okay, so as a young actor, or as any actor, old actors even now, I'm still doing it today. But you hit the pavement. You go on auditions and you peddle your talent. And it wasn't really going well for me for a while after I joined the church. And my mom actually said at one point, "See, you shouldn't have become Mormon. If you hadn't become Mormon, you'd be doing a lot better."
I'm sure she believed that. I really believe. She must have believed that.
And a week after she said that to me, it was feast or famine. I went right from famine to a pretty nice feast. I had met with some casting people that were putting together a new TV series for ABC called The Mackenzies of Paradise Cove. They had actually already done a pilot, but when they tested the pilot with some audiences, they seemed to like the concept and a lot of the cast, except for one of the characters, the oldest brother of the family, and so they had to. The pilot had been picked up to go to series, and very quickly they had to find someone to replace that other young man. And I had to, for this audition, I had told Lyman that I would watch his kids, and I had a couple of his kids with me that I had to take to the audition.
Oh, no.
And sit them outside, and somehow that inspired the casting people and the director, and said, "Look how good he is with kids.
Yeah,
he's got these young kids out here, and he's watching them." And so I think that had a little bit to do with it. A couple of days later, I met with Tony Thomopoulos, who was the president of ABC, and they said okay. And 2 days later, I was on a flight to Hawaii to star in a TV series.
And is it fair? So I watched what I could on YouTube. It's pretty grainy.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to see. There's a great scene of you helping a younger kid. You're working on a car or something. But,
yeah.
But
that's how I did my part to provide for the families. The concept was there were these 5 orphan siblings whose parents, they lived on the coast in Hawaii, Wonderland Cove, or Paradise Cove. And their parents had gone out one day in their little sailboat, and a storm came up, and the parents never came back. So the kids, realizing that without parents, they would probably be separated. And so they talked a fisherman, lived a couple doors down from them, to pretend that he was their uncle. So they called him Uncle Cuda. And so that's the concept of the show. And we helped him out, and he pretended to be our uncle, and he got us out of problems.
And you were the oldest brother.
I was the oldest brother.
And this was, it's hard to explain to our younger audience. I mean, you know, I was obviously alive and well during this time. It's hard to explain what TV was like at that time. It was really legitimately, which of the three shows are we going to watch tonight?
Yeah.
And I could tell you when I was...
There was three networks, ABC, NBC, CBS. There was no Fox. There was no cable.
No cable. Cable was so fledgling that you didn't know anyone who actually had it. I mean, this is pre-MTV. This is pre-all of that. And so legitimately, I could tell you back in this time when every show was going to be. You knew what shows were on at what time.
And our show was, in its premiere episode, was sandwiched between Mork and Mindy and Happy Days.
You've got to be kidding me.
So people tuned in to watch the number one show on TV, Happy Days.
Yeah.
Then they watched us, and then they watched Mork and Mindy.
Yeah.
And that became the power block. And because of the lead-in from Happy Days, where you got the majority of TV viewership watching, if you catch their interest in the first couple minutes of your show, they're going to stick with you the whole hour. So our premiere episode of Mackenzies to this day remains the highest rated TV premiere. It came in at number 2 for the week.
Wow, really?
So
that's massive.
So, you know, the viewership, I don't know what that translates to in the amount of viewers, but it's in the tens of millions.
Yeah, that's really impressive. So all of a sudden, you're a star. I mean, you literally went from unknown guy to being a star. I mean, you're on millions of TV sets. Did you start getting recognized?
Yeah.
Was that kind of a funny thing?
It was very foreign. I mean, as an actor, it's kind of what you hope for.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's actors and there's celebrities. I hope that I was more in the actor category, but as a 19-year-old kid, when people start coming up to you on the street and saying, "Hey, I saw you last night," you know, it's flattering, and it's
So here's a great question. When was your first magazine cover?
Oh goodness. First magazine cover came out before the series ever premiered.
Oh,
because
really?
You know, ABC, they're trying to, you know, build a little buzz about the show. And so as soon as I came back from filming in Hawaii, they had these interviews set up with me and photo sessions set up with me with Tiger Beat and Teen Beat
and all that. And again, for our younger listeners, I mean, there are listeners in their 40s and 50s and 60s right now who, female listeners whose hearts are beating a little bit faster, thinking back to Tiger Beat. But, you know, I've seen the photos, and it's literally the guys we're talking about, Scott Baio and Willie Ames and Shawn Stevens right there.
Yeah. It's
was
funny.
that surreal?
Today I've remained friends with some of those guys over the years. And, you know, Willie, I still keep in contact with. And just today
Willie Ames was Tommy on Eight Is Enough.
8 Is Enough. And just today I was going back and forth a little bit, texting Peter Barton, who was a friend of mine.
Oh, no kidding.
You know, Peter was The Powers of Matthew Starr.
Yeah.
And he and I became friends because we both tested for the lead role at the same time.
Funny.
And Peter got it, and he's a great guy, and to this day we remain friends.
It's awesome. So you're doing this show.
Yeah.
But the show did one season?
The show did one season. You know, with only the 3 networks, only so many nights of prime time each week. You can imagine that it's
competitive.
Very, very, very competitive as to which show is going to make it and which shows. And it's not only competitive, but it's very political. So if you have someone like, name some of the top producers of the day, Aaron Spelling.
Aaron Spelling, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's who comes to mind right
so
away.
In fact, I think it was Aaron Spelling. He had maybe half a dozen shows on that he was producing. And he had this one show, and it was down to us and Aaron's show. Mr. Spelling, I sound like I know him. Me and Aaron. You know, only one slot available, and I'm sure he had the leverage and said, well, it's going to be us. And by the time they made that decision and put that show on the air, and it went a couple of episodes and bombed, by that time, we were all off on other adventures, and it wasn't possible to
So
reconvene all of us again.
It wasn't one of Aaron Spelling's big hits.
No, but the the show that got canceled, I think, was called Salvage One, and I think Fred McMurray or somebody like that was in charge of a salvage operation in outer space.
Oh my gosh! Really?
Yeah, that's
that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, but our show was created by William Blinn and Jerry Thorpe, Blinn Thorpe Productions, and William Blinn had also created Eight Is Enough.
Okay, yeah.
And Starsky and Hutch.
Unbelievable! I had a Starsky and Hutch poster in my room when I was little.
And so when Mackenzies went down after a season, there was a part open in Eight Is Enough, so Bill Blinn recommended to ABC that we bring Shawn over to Eight Is Enough.
And what role did you play on Eight Is Enough?
Jack Binder was my name.
Yeah.
And I was the youngest daughter, Elizabeth's away at college boyfriend.
Elizabeth.
For the last two seasons.
Such a cutie.
Connie Needham.
Yeah.
Is her name.
It's so, again, I kind of fanboy out with this stuff because of my age. I mean, I grew up watching all these shows, and you went on a run. I mean, you had a recurring role on Eight Is Enough, but you went on a run. I mean, our listeners, again, of our age, will very well know you were on Chips, Too Close for Comfort. I mean, that's amazing to me because that was the show we kind of weren't allowed to watch.
Yeah, it was a little edgy.
It was all over my head, by the way. I go back to it now and I go, holy cow, there's an inappropriate joke like every 3 minutes, but we didn't know it at the time. Yeah. There was Too Close for Comfort and Three's Company were the two outlawed shows.
Yeah. Ted Baxter?
Yeah, Ted
was
Baxter.
The dad.
Yes.
Yeah. And he had two very vivacious daughters.
Yeah, beautiful girls.
And I was the tutor. No, the youngest daughter was my tutor. And I was the high school jock. And, of course, being in close proximity to her when the parents aren't home, I mean, we're talking early.
Sure. I mean, it's, by today's standards, it's rated G.
Yeah.
You know, and then they had a friend who at the time we thought was just goofy.
Yeah. And what's his name? Oh, goodness.
Yeah. I can't think of his name either.
Jim J. Bullock.
Jim J. Bullock.
Jim J. Bullock.
Yeah, sure.
Crazy.
And then a show that I don't think I ever missed in first run, The Facts of Life, which you take the good, you take the bad. Yeah. You take them both, and there you have.
Yeah. In fact, this last week, I think we lost...
that's right.
Miss Ray. She passed away.
Yeah, who played...
She was 90.
Mrs...
Oh, what was her name?
I'll get there. I will remember all of it.
Yeah, she was the house mom to all the girls.
Facts of Life was always on with Different Strokes.
Different Strokes.
They were always
in fact,
on together.
she crossed over. I think her character crossed over to both shows.
Yeah,
or at least she has an actor.
Edna Garrett was her name.
She
Mrs.
worked
Garrett.
on both
Yeah.
shows. That's right.
And then all of a sudden, this leads to The Search for Tomorrow.
Yeah.
What was The Search for Tomorrow?
Search for Tomorrow was a soap opera, daytime drama. That was filmed in New York City, and they were trying to up the ratings, and they, demographically they weren't necessarily hitting the younger, teens, 20s crowds. So they wanted to bring in somebody that could maybe bump up their viewership again with that, age group. And so they invited me to come over and to do a stint on Search for Tomorrow.
You did 98 episodes on Search for Tomorrow.
Yeah, but by today's standards, I mean, there's people that were on Days of Our Lives or Young and the Restless 40 years ago that are still there.
Well, and talk about iconic. You were on Days of Our Lives.
Days of Our Lives.
How was the experience? You're LDS, and you're working on Days of Our Lives.
Yeah.
Was there conflict? Was that difficult at times?
My character, I always try, once I joined the church, and to be fair, I think I wouldn't, regardless of my church membership, I wouldn't have done it anyway, but... I always made sure that the characters that I was going to be playing were going to be the more wholesome. And, there's a price to pay for playing the more wholesome characters.
For sure.
Because they're not always the most exciting characters. They're not always the best written characters.
They're not always the most memorable.
They're not the most memorable. They're not the ones that have the longevity. It's always the bad, guy that sticks around a long time on those types of shows. But, I did my time, so to speak, on them. And I was always invited to stick around, and by the time I felt like it wasn't fulfilling me artistically, creatively, or that there were, brighter brighter pastures elsewhere. And my managers were always trying to say, and agents were, hey, we got this feature coming up, or we've got this, you don't want to get tied down to daytime. Hindsight,
You did 136 episodes of Days of Our Lives.
And I bet people can't remember one because I was the good guy.
I didn't watch it at the time. Yeah. I was 11, 12. Yeah. I was much more into, and actually, your next credit. I'm going through IMDb right now. You were on Fame. Yeah. I cannot believe you were on Fame.
Yeah, that was really fun. Again, directed and produced by William Blinn.
Yeah. So you were just one of his.
Yeah, crew. He was my my benefactor, my mentor. He believed in me from the beginning and continued to do so.
I loved Fame. I loved that show so much. It was on Sunday nights for the longest time, and I just absolutely loved it.
And I got to sing, and well, I'm not a dancer, so I wouldn't call it dancing. But if people want to go to YouTube and put in Shawn Stevens Fame. And you can see a whole episode there.
Well, we're going to share a bunch of links this week on Facebook so that we can see, because I went back to a lot of this stuff, and I'm telling you, this is my childhood. This is such cool stuff. So then, very, very interestingly, in 1985, it stops.
Yeah. And
you went through a big shift in your life.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what was going on in this time.
Well, so in 1984, I got married. I met a girl at our singles ward in Studio City, California, and literally it was love at first sight from my, perspective.
Yeah, when you saw her,
it took me a year and a half or so to convince her, but we got married in '84. And
didn't you casually sit and read the Tiger Beat with your face on the cover?
That's really funny, because one of the things that really drew me to her is she had no idea what I did for a living.
Yeah, who you were as a persona.
Well, yeah, there was no knowledge. In fact, I met her there, and then the next night next day we sat by each other in church, and the next night we went to home evening group together, and so 3 days, boom, boom, boom. And during this whole time, we never really talked about what each other did. We just somehow that got glossed over. And she never asked and was never curious about it. So I'm like having these wonderful conversations with a beautiful young lady who's not attracted to anything other than
the actor,
than me.
Yeah. Not the person on the screen.
That was really refreshing. So
That's
we talked
awesome.
and talked. And then one of her girlfriends told her, hey, do you know what that guy does? She said, no. Well, so she found out. And then the next time I saw her, she said, remember, there's no cell phones, by the way, at this time. So it's not like she just, did this and looked me up or anything.
She didn't do this at all. She's probably doing this with a rotary dial.
Exactly. But so the next time I saw her, she said, oh, I heard that you work on soap operas, like Days of Our Lives. And I said, yeah. She said, that's really cool, because do you know the guy who played the character Oliver on Search for Tomorrow? Or pardon me, Oliver was Days of Our Lives. The guy who played the character Zach on Search for Tomorrow a couple years ago? And I said, yeah, I know that guy. And she said, oh, that is so cool, because my sister, this is my then girlfriend, saying that her sister had been pregnant during that summer and watched Search for Tomorrow religiously and fell in love with this character named Zach. And when she had a child, she named the baby Zach.
No way.
And so I...
What an uncomfortable conversation.
I said...
that's hilarious.
I said, well, yeah, I know that guy. In fact, that was me. She said, no. The next weekend, her sister and mother flew in from Arizona to meet me.
Did they already know that you were Zach? Did your sister or did your girlfriend tell them?
Yeah,
before they got there.
Kayleen told them before they got there.
Oh, okay.
So they came out to meet me and
introduce you to little Zach.
When we were married a few months later, a year later, Zach was the ring bearer in our wedding. So.
Oh, what a neat story!
But Zach's like 32 now or something.
That is super cool. So you decide that you're going to shift your life now. You make a major shift. What was that transition time? Well,
about this time, I had heard about somebody contacted me about a film that the church was doing.
Yeah.
And asked if I would come and meet with them for an audition, and I did. And the audition really consisted of just bearing your testimony and thank you very much. And I knew really nothing else. It was kind of a hush project, knew nothing more about it. And then a couple weeks later, I get a phone call from a guy named Mike McLean saying, we'd like you to do this film for the church. And are you interested? Of course I was, because I'd always kind of dreamed of using my talent
Sure.
for church purposes. And so I ended up doing the film that summer, which many people may know as Our Heavenly Father's Plan.
Yeah.
And when the film was completed, it was a very spiritual experience doing the film. A lot of miracles happened, and but when it was over and had been edited, and the church now had this completed project in their hands, I was contacted by a fellow who was one of the heads of Bonneville Communications, and he said, can you come? I think I was actually in town doing some looping, which is voiceover recording.
Audio. Yeah.
And he said, let's have lunch. So I went and had lunch with him over by Temple Square. And he said that, the brethren were wondering if you would consider putting your acting career on the shelf for a season so that this film that we've done can do its missionary work throughout the world and not have people who are being taught by the missionaries who see this film tune into their television the next day and see you as an actor and then break that down and break the spirit,
the fourth wall,
the fourth wall, break, confuse the people. Well, was this guy really telling his story, or was it a script? Was he acting?
Sure.
Was he sincere? And so that's all. Acting was all I knew. That's how I made my living. That's how I supported my family. And we had a daughter at this time. And wait, you're asking me to? So I wandered. I'm kind of in a daze. I didn't even begin to try to call my wife and tell her about this because I had to process this first. And I walked across the street to Temple Square, and I go into the tabernacle. It was open, and they were giving tours and stuff. And I just sat there. And a short time later, Boyd K. Packer comes in. It was coincidence. I mean, it wasn't by design, or maybe divine design, but not by.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that I blow that off as coincidence at this point.
But anyway, we chatted a little bit, and he chatting with an apostle. But he recognized me because they had all seen the film.
Sure.
This was the first time the church had ever done anything really.
So I didn't want to interrupt the story, but it's important to right now we think of Mormon ads and we think of the Mormon channel and all of the media. This was such a new concept.
Yeah.
There had not been, there weren't the resources to distribute it anyway before this. Yeah. But this was so big. I don't know how to help our audience understand how big that era was.
Yeah, there were the first film was Our Heavenly Father's Plan, I think, and then there was a couple of others, Together Forever, and what were some of the other? Families Are Forever? Or
Families Are Forever was one.
There was 3 or 4 of them. But the other films were telling a story where there were characters.
Yeah.
But in Our Heavenly Father's Plan, it was a person, an individual, a young man, talking directly, breaking down that fourth wall.
Yeah, talking
directly to the camera, and therefore talking to investigators. And sharing
about the big stuff about why are we here?
Well, it became the first discussion. It became the first point of contact for missionaries worldwide. It was translated into dozens of languages.
Yeah, we were talking earlier that I showed the film strip.
Yeah, and there was
the film strip version of it.
There was even a commercial campaign. People are used to seeing those now. Where somebody gets up there, Flo or whoever, and talks about a product and says, "Hey, if you dial this number, we'll send it to you in the mail." Well, we did that. We did these commercials that aired worldwide, and I'm talking to people across the television saying, "Hey, I found something in my life that has helped me," and it's given me more meaning in life. And I'd like to share it with you. And if you will call this number, representatives of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints would love to bring you a CD copy.
Yeah.
And so...
Incredible.
So my wife and I did make the decision to, follow the promptings and follow the Spirit. But that meant that I had to find another way to make a living and support my family and my wife.
And you started so young with acting. I mean, that's all you'd done.
That's all I'd known.
So what did you do?
Struggled for several years. I bagged groceries.
Yeah.
I delivered bread.
Yeah.
My wife, she had been a clothing designer, not in the film industry, but in the fashion industry, and she went back to work, and so I stayed home and watched the baby, and we only had one car, and we had to move out of. I had a really nice condo and nice cars, 280ZX. I mean, the car of my dreams, and we lost all these things, and we moved into a garage apartment, so it was a couple of really, really humbling, really hard, really painful years, but there was a lot of opportunity to search, my soul and try to realize what's important. And
did you struggle with not getting bitter of going, I had momentum. I kind of had that momentum. I mean, there got to be times you're delivering bread or you're bagging groceries thinking.
There was a lot of tears.
Yeah. I can imagine.
There was a huge amount of tears, real tears. And I don't know that I've exposed this before, but that also led to weight gain and depression. And, delivering bread, in the middle of the night, for every loaf of bread you drop off, you pick up what's old and stale. And I would just reach behind me and grab a loaf of stale bread and just start, and so after a few months of that, I started putting on weight. And what I realized in hindsight years later was that was just a coping mechanism, or I was putting up a wall. So even if that phone rang and they wanted me to come and be in a movie or a TV show or something, that I could say, no,
I'm not the same Shawn Stevens that you're looking for.
I wouldn't be your tabloid.
Did you at any point think, okay, time for the comeback? Because, the time had passed.
No, because luckily, or... not luck. I'm sure the Lord had His hand in all of these things. I did end up working through some friends in film production, and I saw that, hey, well, even if I can't be the guy in front of the camera, why can't I work behind the camera, doing whatever I could? The pay would be better. I would be around filmmaking, which I loved. I would be in the company of other actors, and I could watch their work and maybe learn something from what they're doing. And I fell into a position called craft services, which, if you've ever been on a film set,
Crafty.
Hey, Crafty.
People love Crafty. You're the most popular guy on the film set.
And for those people that don't know what you may see craft services at the bottom of the credits, but basically craft services provides snacks and food and sustenance and nutrition, and
it's a catering. I mean, it's full-on catering. Yeah. You are feeding the entire crew. Yeah. Sometimes that's a meal. Sometimes that's 3 meals in a day. Yeah. It's constantly having snacks out and making sure that. Which, of course, also led to more of my nibbling and snacking. So. Yeah, sure.
But anyway,
those are long days on set.
But I got I got the benefits, and and I joined the union and made great money, and that lasted 30 years.
Unbelievable.
Until just a couple of years ago, 6 years ago now, I was injured. My first series that I worked on was The Wonder Years, so that's how far back that goes.
You did craft services for The Wonder Years?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, 5 years.
That is amazing, Shawn. In this time, you had children.
Yeah.
Tell us about your kids.
4 children.
Unbelievable.
Our oldest one is our beautiful daughter, Tari, or Tarin. And Tari now lives in Harriman. She and her husband, Dylan, have 2 children. Dylan had been a missionary in Burbank when I was the ward mission leader.
That's cool.
And then my oldest boy, Corey, He and his wife Mallory have 2 children. They're expecting their third in December. And,
Joy.
And Corey and his wife own a company in Provo called Taft Clothing. And then my next son is Perry. And Perry is a student at BYU in Provo. And he's also an artist and in construction. And then our youngest, Kaysen, turns 25 this year. And Kaysen is also a student at BYU, but he also works full-time working in funding for VA loans.
Awesome.
And all 3 of my sons serve missions.
And you're still married to your sweetheart?
Still married. We're 33 years now. And so 6 years ago I had this accident. It forced me to retire from the film industry or from production. And so I took out my pension and disability and all that stuff. And I was now the stay-at-home. And my wife took a job for the church working as the supervisor of the LA temple.
Oh, incredible.
Right. Supervisor, that would be the Lord, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Supervisor of the cafeteria at the LA temple. Woo, boy.
Oh, that's
Did
really
I marry
funny.
above my...
of the cafeteria. Yeah.
And then...
that's funny.
So a couple years ago, we decided... Well, backtrack once again. About 5 years ago, the Deseret News did an article, a story. A writer for Deseret News named Trent Toon contacted me, and they were kind of doing a whatever happened to.
Yeah, where is he now?
Talking about, where is he now? Talking about our Heavenly Father's plan. It was kind of approaching a 30-year anniversary, I think, at the time. And so that became a story in the Deseret News called Lights, Camera, Faith, the Shawn Stevens story.
Right. And it's still up. People can still find it. I read it this morning.
And that article got into the hands of T.C. Christensen. And at the time, T.C. was working on a movie called The Cokeville Miracle.
Yes.
And he contacted me and said, it's about time you came out of retirement or exile. And I have a part for the character of the bishop in Cokeville Miracle.
Yeah.
Would you like to come up here and play with us? So I did that movie. And then I started networking and did another film on the heels of that and a couple others. And
did that reignite your love of acting?
Goodness. It just reminded me of the passion that I had for it, and it had never gone away. And I kept it under a bushel long enough. And during the time that you had mentioned Kurt Hale, during the time of the singles ward and ward basketball, whatever those movies were, or Saints and Soldiers and all those. I'm seeing these movies and I'm thinking, they're making Mormon movies now. I should be up there in Utah, but I had a career in LA and there really was no. But over a couple of years, all of a sudden, doors were opened and I was able to come up here and start working.
And now you're living in Utah.
Yeah. Then just a couple of years ago, by this time, all 4 of our children lived here, and my wife and I were thinking, what are we doing here now? Well, more me. She really liked Burbank and still does. But we got to thinking, hey, we've got grandchildren, we've got our children. Nobody's really talking about coming back to California at any time.
Right.
Maybe it's time we think about following the family.
Awesome.
And my wife let her upline know that she was interested in perhaps working in Utah, and within a couple of weeks, she got a call asking her if she would come and take over as supervisor of the Mount Timpanogos Temple.
Awesome, which is our temple right here.
Which, so she took, and I moved her up here before I was even here.
Wow.
And so we've lived here now 2 years this month.
And now you're back into acting. You've got this beautiful grown family.
Yeah.
Shawn, your story is so inspiring to me. What advice do you have? You could have gone bitter 1,000,000 times over. You could have. And when I talk to you, our listeners will get the sense for you. But from you, sitting here with you, you are a man of so much peace. I don't feel anxiety or angst, even as you're telling this story. What advice do you have for people who are going through adversity?
Well, I don't know necessarily that I'm qualified to really give advice on the subject, because everybody has to figure this out for themselves. And I'm sure there was lots of times I could have made the wrong. I mean, I made a lot of bad choices over the years, but I never really made those monumental decisions that led me and my family away from the gospel.
What kept you so strong through the lean years?
The lean financial years?
Yeah.
My kids, my family, my wife, the gospel. I mean, it's being somebody who didn't grow up in the gospel. I know what a treasure it is.
Yeah.
And always knew the peace that it had brought into my life when I accepted it. I have a very strong testimony, and it came about in a very, very powerful personal way for me.
Right.
And so whenever I had any doubts or any temptations, monumental temptations, I succumbed many times to, again, what I would necessarily, I guess, consider minor ones, but the biggies, I really tried to stay true to my faith. My kids just mean the world to me, and as I know they do to my wife, and I never wanted to let my kids down. Even when it was hard to get up and get the family to church every Sunday and
Right.
And home evenings were difficult. I can't sit here and say that we were the most regular of home evening providers for our kids.
I know that feeling.
Don't beat yourselves up.
Yeah.
I look back and I look forward and I think, how did I end up with such an amazing family? Given all everything that I drug them through. So just even when you don't know why, and even when it's hard, just try to force yourself to make the right decisions and be where you're supposed to be.
So when are you going to start playing the old clips of Grandpa for the grandkids?
It's funny because I, in addition to the clip, so I did a film a couple years ago, actually, that Lyman Dayton directed. Wow. The fellow who had baptized me. It was the first time we had worked together in a film, just a couple years ago, and the film was called Drop Off.
Oh, cool.
And I played an old fellow who had a very unfortunate thing happen to him in his life, which turned him to drink, and he retreated from the world, and then he redeems himself and helps other people. And so anyway, the film's family appropriate. It's available at Seagull and Deseret and all those normal places. But so at the premiere, I got to bring my family, and I have my oldest grandson, Jeremiah, sitting on my lap when Grandpa's up there on this big screen. And but I was I'm even shaggier than I am now, and I can just see Jeremiah kind of looking up at the screen and looking over at me, and just doing this back and forth for a moment. And then at one point he takes my face and he puts it in his hands and he pulls me towards him and he says, "Grandpa, that's you." So that's, and then my daughter has taken video of the kids at her two children, Jack and Rosie, watching me on their television at home. Fun. And dancing around. There's Grandpa, and singing. So it's a lot of fun. My kids, on the other hand, Dad, please put it away. Stop it already. We've seen the scrapbook. Don't. Yeah,
I got to show about 3 years ago. My kids found a tape of an Arctic Circle commercial where I played a dancing strawberry, and I have never heard the end of it. So
never did a dancing strawberry.
I don't get out that kind of stuff. This has been the most phenomenal conversation, Shawn. I cannot thank you enough for coming in. We're going to end the conversation with the way we end all of our interviews, which is, what does being a member of the church mean to you?
I watch these talent shows on TV, and the people get up there and they're asked the question, "What would winning this talent show mean to you?" And they say, "Oh, it would mean everything to me." So I pause a moment to not say it means everything to me, but that's really the answer that comes to mind. It's made me who I am. It sustains me when I have doubts of who I can be or who I was meant to be. It reminds me of what my purpose is, and it's not to be a star. It's not to be, fawned over by people. It's not to be recognized in a crowd. Really, at the end of the day, it's to be a good father and a good husband and a good grandfather. And the church always provides me the template and the teachings of how to become that and try to remain that.
Husband, father, actor, true teen idol, and now once again, actor on the big screen, and a man of God and a man of peace. Shawn, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your latter-day life with us. We appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
My special thanks to my guest, Shawn Stevens. Is he just awesome? Oh my gosh, what a great actor and what a great story. He's just a very humble, very approachable, all-around good guy. And do not forget that you can catch Shawn as Scrooge. He's got some other projects coming up, too, that are really cool. But he will be Scrooge in A Christmas Carol coming up at the big, beautiful new Hale Center Theater. Be sure to check that out. Thank you again, Shawn. Awesome. This week in my latter-day life, I actually had a cool business trip. My business trips are not always cool, but I've mentioned many times, I grew up in San Jose, California. I've had several guests from San Jose on the show, and this week my business travels actually took me back to San Jose. And I got in at around 5 o'clock, and I connected with an old friend of mine. In fact, it was really fun because he and I have been friends since we were both about 14, and his 14-year-old son was there with him, and we all went out to dinner. So fun to catch up, to have a friend of more than 30 years. It was just incredible. And then after I dropped him off, I actually went and drove around my old neighborhood. I hadn't been there for a couple of years. And to drive around, I just took time to be grateful. I stopped in front of the house where I grew up, and I was grateful. And I stopped at some of the places where I worked, and I thought about the people that I've met. What a wonderful experience it was to go home. I don't need to go back and relive my past, but it was beautiful to take time to be grateful. And I even thought about some of the challenges I had, some of the difficult times. I drove by one of my old schools, and I thought about how hard it was sometimes, but also just how grateful I was for the experience. Home is what makes us, and I'm grateful for our home right here in Linden, Utah. I love it. Love where I live, and I'm grateful for everywhere I've gotten to live. But there's something special about where we grow up. And for some of us, it's not the easiest thing on earth, and for some of us, it's 20 different places that we grow up. But that is what makes us. And I'm grateful for the family and the home I got to grow up in, and it was so neat to go back and see those places. But then the best part about it all was getting on an airplane again and coming home to my own family. I like where my life is now. I'm so thankful for all the places that made me who I am, but it's good to be here and alive in this time. And that is what is happening this week in my latter-day life. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're watching us on video, thank you. And I apologize. I've got a great face for audio podcasts, I guess they would say. I think they used to say that you got a great face for radio. But basically, this was a test. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you're watching it on video, we'll see if we do them again. They're a lot of work. You can catch us, of course, anywhere that you get your podcasts. We're available on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Apple Podcasts, all over the place. If you enjoy the show, please share it with someone. We keep growing, and we just love it. And if you know someone who'd make a great guest, gosh, I had 3 people reach out to me this past week. Awesome. We love it. Thank you so much. Be sure to keep those suggestions coming, and we love any feedback on the show. So that's pretty much it. So until next week, when we'll have another fantastic episode, please remember, as always, there is a great, big, beautiful world out there. So go be in it, just not of it. Thanks for listening.